Welcome everyone to this afternoon's session on day one of EUSEF, EU Sustainable Energy Week. And you are in the right place, wherever you are, whether you're joining us online. Hi, how are you? Get a cup of coffee for this afternoon session. And welcome to everyone here in the room. You are in the right place. You are at Solar Talks, getting the most out of your roof. And this session is organized by the European Environmental Bureau and by Solar Heat Europe. And my name is Claire Taylor. I'm stepping into this moderation role at the very last minute on behalf of Delia Villagrasa, Director of the Cool Heating Coalition. She was scheduled to moderate this session. Unfortunately, Delia is not well enough to be with us today, so we wish her a speedy recovery. Despite these circumstances, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to moderate today's panel. We have a super lineup of speakers, lots of expertise and insights. But before we hear from our panelists, I just want to say a few words on heating and cooling generally, and why we really need to accelerate the transition to clean heating. And this is a transition in which we hope solar thermal, the clean heat technology we have in focus today, has a big potential role to play. So in a nutshell, heating and cooling is half of the energy we use here in the European Union, and most of this is still powered by fossil fuels, despite the availability of clean heating solutions. And when we come down to the level of the household, heating and cooling accounts for about 80% of the energy we use every day. So most of the energy we use to heat our water, to heat our homes, and that's why we really need sustainable, renewable, and affordable heating and cooling to bring the Green Deal home and really feel the benefit from the energy transition in our everyday lives. So that's the mission of the Cool Heating Coalition in a nutshell: sustainable, renewable, and affordable heating and cooling by 2040. And I'm pleased to note that we have two coalition members, organizations represented today. Caroline from BPIE is here, and Davide, who is indeed the chair of our coalition from the EEB. The Cool Heating Coalition launched just under 2 months ago. Our members are NGOs, civil society organizations, and think tanks. Please take a moment to read our 8-point plan for a cool heating revolution. If you're online, you should be getting a link in the chat soon. If you're in the room here from the lovely Anna Nanu, you can get a hard copy. And do check out our recent report, Fahrenheit 2040, Heating and Cooling in the EU, for a primer on the EU legislative framework for heating and cooling. Okay, that's my plug done. Back to the business of the afternoon. A few housekeeping rules. Okay. Normally you say, put your phones and laptops away, but in this case, have them ready because we'll be doing quizzes, we'll be on Slidos and so on. Can you see the Wi-Fi code there? Yes, you can, everyone in the room. The Q&A chat to submit your questions. For the people watching online, we really want to get your questions, so use the Q&A and the chat function. And everyone here, the old-fashioned way of putting your hand up if you want to ask a question of our speakers. This session is being recorded. It'll be available later along with the slides. And some housekeeping that's not on this slide. It's the hammer of justice. There's many people speaking in this session, so if anyone's been speaking too long, justice will be done. And you stop when you hear that terrifying sound. Right. Who have we got on the agenda for this afternoon? Okay, the good people you see here on stage. Annette Pearson, not quite how you pronounce your surname, I know, but I'm not Swedish. Policy Officer from the European Commission's DG NR. Caroline Milne, Head of Comms, BPIE, Buildings Performance Institute Europe. Oleguera Fuertes, any good? Yeah, okay. Group Product Manager from BDR Thermea. Josephine Izard. Who is there? A few more people coming. There she is. Oh, beautiful. Okay. Project Manager, Renewable Heat and Energy Renovation from France's General Directorate for Climate and Energy, the already mentioned Davide Sabadin. Deputy Policy Manager for Climate at the EEB, and Ingrid Vogler, there you are, Head of Energy Technology at GDW, the Federal Association of German Housing and Real Estate Companies. And Ingrid, I believe you are also representing Housing Europe here today. Okay, great. So is everyone getting ready and warmed up? Because it is time for a quiz, I hope. Okay, get out your phones, you scan the code, and we will just test the knowledge level of this distinguished audience. First question, how do solar thermal panels work? I have a timer on this. Do they convert sunlight directly into heat, or do they convert sunlight into electricity and then heat? And, okay, come on, someone's got to vote. I can't talk my way through this one. Is everyone on the Slido? Is it taking time to get to the Slido? Yes. Okay, the Slido is slow. Oh, and it's gone on to the next question already. Okay. Well, the correct answer for the first one was A, in case anyone's interested. Solar thermal panels convert directly into heat. Yes? Okay, I'm going to assume most people got that. Let's talk about this one. Greece. And the question is, this is the true false biggest overall installed capacity of solar heat. Okay. And it seems like people think it's false, and indeed it is false. So, Holger, where do you think?
Germany, I would say.
Oh, Germany. What are the top three then, Holger?
Germany, Greece, and Italy, maybe.
No, yeah. I was going to say fired, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. Germany, Greece, and Italy. Okay. Third question. Can we move on to the third question on the side? Okay, great. The system is now working. Now, space. How much space do you need for equivalent amounts of energy from solar thermal panels versus PV panels? For the same amount of energy, do you need more space, less space, same amount of space? Oh, this is looking good. This is looking good. I'd say Pedro's on the Slido there, are you? You're not messing on social media, are you? You're on Slido. Okay, good man. Okay.
I hope he got it right.
Yeah, I hope he got it right as well. Yeah. And indeed, who answered? I have no idea. Please, come on, you don't go into a quiz and say, I have no idea. The correct answer is, we do have an informed audience. The correct answer is C. And your fun fact here is, actually, maybe I'll make people guess it. Anyone want to guess at the solar thermal panel efficiency range? 70 to 83% compared to PV?
20.
Very good, very good. Yeah, someone here knows what they're talking about, thank God.
25.
Oh, it's 17 to 23 I have here. It's steady now, steady. Okay. And second last question. Is the system working? Thank you. Can solar heat and solar PV share the same rooftop space? This is like a marriage or a relationship or something, isn't it? Yes, no, don't know, don't answer, don't know. Take a guess. You might be right. Okay, I see some phones in the room. Folks at home, you got to help us out here, please. Vote on one of these. People are changing their minds. Oh, look at this. A whopping 94% say yes. There are at least two ways to integrate PV and solar thermal. The first way would be the hybrid PVT panels. These are the ones that produce both heat and electricity. Remember this could be coming up later. And the second is by having both solar thermal and PV side by side. And that's something we might come back to later and talk about when used in conjunction with heat pumps. Okay, I guess we are feeling warmed up. One last question to go. It's a true, false. Solar thermal panels can only work with direct irradiation when the sun is shining. Do they only work with direct? Are people voting? They are. that's the time. That's not okay. And the correct answer is indeed B. The correct answer is the vast majority of solar thermal collectors, flat plate collectors, most of the market, they can indeed work when the sun is shining, but also indirect and on a cloudy day, as we often have here in Brussels, or what we call summer. Though productivity is obviously better with direct irradiation. Okay, can we take a look at the overall results? Congratulations. Oh, we have a, right, I didn't know this screen was coming. This is kind of exciting. Are any of these winners in the room? Oh, well done. Well done. Yeah, you don't work for Solar Heat Europe, do you? No, no, no. Okay, fine. Or EEB. No. Well, good man. Good man. Well done. Is Lucy in the room as well? Oh, yeah, well done you. Okay. Okay, it's a good day out. So don't worry, everyone else, if you didn't get these correct, we'll have another quiz. Well, a few questions anyway, later on in the session, and plenty of opportunities to learn more from our distinguished speakers in a series of rapid-fire interventions, I would say. We have legislative framework, outlook for building renovation, and the how to integrate solar thermal installations. So if you have questions for any of the lovely speakers, put them in the Q&A. We will come to them shortly. And then I'll say our first speaker is the DG Ener's Annette. She's going to tell us about the recently adopted EPBD, the Buildings Directive, the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive, and Article 10. Please, Annette, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks for this introduction. So maybe I could have the clicker for the slides. I saw from the slide that there's a lot of knowledge in this room and online. So let me just give you a very brief introduction. So in the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, there is a solar mandate, but the EPBD, as we call it, of course, does not work in isolation. This is a part of the Fit for 55 puzzle with very close interactions with the Renewable Energy Directive, with the Energy Efficiency Directive, and it also, the solar mandate in the EPBD was also not part of the initial proposal, but it came later with the Repower EU plan, which was prepared to make sure that we could really reduce the use of gas, and in particular Russian gas. So what happened was that the co-legislators, they agreed to take on this solar mandate for the EPBD, and this is something completely new. We haven't had something like this in the directive before. So I'm going to show you one slide which sort of outlines what is in there. I will not go into any details because we have 4 minutes and it's not the topic for today to go into details. But I just wanted to highlight that this is a solar mandate. It's not a PV mandate or a solar thermal mandate, but it's a mandate for all solar technologies. And of course, the idea is to a very large degree, use the existing structures to make the most use of the roofs that are already there so that we don't need to make new space for this renewable energy production. And it covers both the new buildings, both residential and non-residential buildings, but also the existing buildings when it's public or non-residential when it's public or non-residential buildings. So, of course, this is also part of the phase out of fossil fuels in buildings, which is really an important part of the directive. So, of course, replacing heat with the solar thermal is one opportunity which is out there to reduce the use of fossil fuels in buildings. And around 2 weeks ago, the directive entered into force. So now the member states have 2 years for the implementation. So we are in very close dialogue with the member states to prepare some guidance documents to facilitate the implementation and to clarify. And this is also why I'm so happy to be here today to hear also your input and your questions. What would need to be addressed, what could be highlighted in these guidances to make the implementation as effective as possible. And yeah, I think that's all from my side for the introduction.
Okay, thanks, Annette. That's really nice. So you mentioned the European Commission's guidance for member states on the Buildings Directive, and you're looking for feedback, or you're looking to stakeholders to input into what the guidance could look like, do you think? Okay.
Yes, definitely. We are working very closely with the member states. So we meet in the EPBD committee almost every month to discuss, and also stakeholders in addition to the governments.
And what's the timeline? It's 2 years for implementation, and then 2 years starts a few weeks ago with the adoption of the directive. And then when is the guidance published?
So it will be published around a year from now.
Okay. Okay. That is super interesting. We're going to hear more about that. Next up, it is my great pleasure to give the floor to the lovely Caroline Milne from BPIE. And she is going to talk a bit about cities and one-stop shops and, yes, community engagement. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Coming from BPIE, we're a think tank focusing on how to accelerate the decarbonization of buildings, so renovation. So I'm not coming from the solar perspective, but taking really the building perspective approach. And I was asked to speak about the role of cities and one-stop shops. And so what I would like to say and really focus on in this short time is to say that, well, the short answer is they have a very big role, and there is a huge potential now more than ever for cities and for one-stop shops in particular to accelerate the energy transition by, I hope, creating trust, a lot more trust in the energy transition. Now, the energy performance of building directives, it also right now gives a clear mandate to member states to develop one-stop shops, to lead the rollout of one-stop shops, one per region or per every 80,000 residents. So we've never seen this type of scale before. And for those who, as a reminder, a one-stop shop, it's a separate entity which should provide financing, administrative, and technical support to building owners, to homeowners along the renovation journey, every step of the way, to simplify it. Renovating a building is a very complex, overwhelming, and daunting process. So it should make it easy. It should make it accessible. That's the idea. And I would argue myself that a one-stop shop could potentially be an olive branch towards society now at a time when people are sick of talking about the energy transition. I have a couple of very quick examples, 2 examples. So this is from an H2020 project called COMACT, and I'm just going to say this was a one-stop shop established in Burgas, the city of Burgas, Bulgaria, as part of the local government in 2022. And since then, through intense collaboration with community stakeholders, they have submitted projects, a number of projects for 235 million euros. The Opengela project is a very well-known H2020 project as well that was really driven by the Basque government in Spain. And 2 pilots, they've done a ton of work since these pilots. This was in 2019. But you can see the numbers for yourselves, the amount of investment that was obtained for projects. And this was working with vulnerable communities, really not big cities, multifamily apartment buildings that needed deep renovations, so the hard-to-get renovations. I want to say that trust is foundational to making all of this work, and people must be at the heart of the energy transition. We shouldn't be thinking about this as an energy transition or a technology transition. There's room for everyone at the table. There's room for every technology at the table now. And the buildings decarbonization debate, what's interesting is that to get the most bang for your buck, let's say, you have to look at the synergies, trade-offs, complementarities between technologies. It's not one or the other. It's not, and it shouldn't be driven by technology itself. There's many ways to make it successful, but I think I need to wrap up already. But I'll just say that the successful case studies that we've seen, and there are many more, it's all about people at the end. Targeted community engagement is really important. Having a holistic picture of the technology and proposing something that will bring the most benefit to the building, to the community. Because for people, it's, as I said, it's not a technology transition. For them, it's a transition to hopefully more dignified living conditions, comfort, healthier living conditions, a better life. Institutionalization, the role of public authorities, cities leading this is really paramount. This is also what creates trust. If it's privately led, it's not going to work. And adequate funding, again, funding obviously for the renovations themselves, but resources in the actual setup of one-stop shops. So there's a way to do it, but we have lots of case studies now showing that it's possible. So, and I'm done. Thank you so much.
That was great. Thanks a lot, Caroline. Yeah, that's an important reminder. Very rousing. Nice to hear of the Open Gala project again. It's really an inspiring project that has benefited a lot of people. Here, I'll pass your slides. I like these. There's lots of pictures on these ones. Olivier Fuertes from BDR Thermea. You're also chair of the small scale working group in Solar Heat Europe. So tell us about the market for solar thermal.
Okay, thank you, Caroline, and thank you, everyone. A pleasure to be here with you. Let me just start, remind you, do you know which are the main challenges that we have in Europe for the energy transition? Let me just highlight the three major ones. First of all, Europe needs to secure their supply of energy. We have learned how dependent we are from Russian gas. We are also struggling with the dependency on technology. Energy transition today is based on Chinese technology. We are depending on the green technologies that come from the Far East. And also, we are becoming very dependent on the electrical grid. Okay, we have decided that we are going to full electrify the economy, and we need to cope with the intermittence of the new renewables. So, but how does it affect to the building sector? Well, you have already introduced before, 40% of the energy consumption today in Europe is consumed in the buildings. If we take at this 40% of consumption, 80% of this consumption is heat demand. And do you know what? Solar thermal is producing heat. Okay. Also, the new building regulations has made that the new buildings are much better insulated. Also, the adoption of the heat pumps and underfloor heating is having a heating installation working in a low temperature, and this is giving a lot of space to enter with solar thermal. And also, while heating demand has decreased a lot with the new standards on the buildings, hot water demand remains very high. And there is no better technology to cover hot water than solar, and also with a minimum impact on carbon footprint. So solar thermal is a very mature technology. We have been used for decades in Europe. But also, when we thought about the energy transition, I think we cannot be naive. It's not black or white. Okay, we need all the renewables that we have on our hands, and solar thermal can hybridize very well with a lot of technologies. Has been hybridized traditionally with gas, but can hybridize also with biomass, can hybridize with heat pumps, and also with PV. Also, in Europe, we have a very active sector on the heating industry. We have been investing a lot in innovation. Let me just mention a couple. For instance, we have collectors with temperature limitation that make solar installations very safe against over temperature. But for sure, the radical innovation we can see today are the PVT collectors. It's this kind of collectors that is producing heat and electricity with the same space. So here, the key point is hybridization. We need all the technologies in our hands. And let me put, if I have time, I can explain very, very quickly. Let me put an example of a good hybridization. For instance, imagine that we want to cover hot water with a hybrid system, combining solar thermal with heat pump. Just with one or two collectors, you can easily cover 60, 70%, even 80%, depending on the location, of your hot water demand. Okay, just to make the numbers very easy today here, let's be conservative and assume 50% of the hot water demand can be covered by solar. So The other half needs to be covered by the auxiliary heater. Just a second, I'm finishing right now. For instance, with a heat pump that has a COP of 3. This means that you are using 1 unit of energy and electricity and you get 3 of heat. So in the total consumption, you are spending 16% of electricity when you get 83% of renewable energy. This is a very sustainable system. And I can wrap up, but I can see the sticker, so...
Yeah. It's very dangerous, all right. Thank you very much for respecting the justice principle. Thank you so much. We get it that solar thermal is happening, 10 million installations already in Europe, and we've had an opening statement from each of our panelists, and now we're going to go into discussion, Q&A. So if you're watching this online, please put your questions into the Q&A or into the chat. And if you're in the room here, you can put your hand up. And while you're thinking of what you're going to ask, Annette and Olivier, what kind of an impact will the solar mandate have on the market, would you say? If you look into your crystal ball.
You mean in the future?
In the future.
In the future, okay. Well, as I said, the 3 main challenges we have in Europe is to secure the energy. Half of the energy in Europe is heat, so we can massively contribute to the decarbonization of the economy in Europe and in specifically in buildings. Also, what is coming is we have a very fragile electrical grid. This is coming. We have a lot of countries now suffering the huge variability of the intermittence on electrical renewables, and this make the option of solar thermal makes us less vulnerable to that. So make us more independent. And also, and last and not least, solar heat is the European solar energy. The materials that is using come from local markets. We have a strong capacity installed in Europe, and is a source of high value jobs in Europe. So also this gives sustainability to our economy. Okay, so we need to ponderate all the benefits we have. So I think that it depends a lot on regulation. What's coming is on the policymakers' hands, but I think solar heat can contribute a lot on the energy transition.
Annette, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, thank you. So I agree, and I also think that the solar mandate will increase the pace of the decarbonization of buildings. That's for sure, and especially when using the existing buildings, the roofs on existing buildings. For instance, if you make a renovation and also take this opportunity, because there's really a large untapped potential of roof availability.
Okay, just out of curiosity, have we got anyone in the room who's run any numbers on the likely effect of the solar mandate? No, something for the coffee break afterwards. Tripling. Okay, I'm reliably informed by someone who should know that this means tripling capacity by 2040. Is that right? 2030. Thank you. Okay. And that's to respond to the solar mandate? That's to respond to the demands of the solar mandate? Okay. There we have some numbers. Now, Davide has taken the unorthodox step of putting a question into Slido while also being here in the room, ladies and gentlemen. So, no, just for doing that, I'm going to ask you to stand up and speak your question.
I was just wondering, because I know that...
What are we on? Guidance, European Commission guidance. Okay, it's you, Annette.
Stumbled so many times in regulations and in directives on when feasible, when doable, when economically and technically feasible, which makes sense but then it leaves room intentionally or unintentionally for interpretation, right? So I'd like to understand whether the guidance will be...
Is it going to be strict? Is it going to be very strict guidance in it?
Is it payback time? Okay, can we do it because it's payback time of 8 years. Is 8 years like make it unfeasible or is it still feasible? Where would you draw a line? I mean, if we draw a line, it's like, what is it, the feasibility?
Just checking. I'm aware that Davide's unmiked, so if you're watching this at home, He's the guy that asked the question in the Slido. Will you consider how far can feasible go? What's the payback time that would be considered beyond feasibility? And this is to do with the Commission's guidance on the solar mandate, Article 10 in the EPBD, right?
Yes, so thank you very much for the question. So, of course, in the guidance, we will talk about technical, economical, functional feasibility, what that can mean, but we will not put specific numbers. We will not say that it's this number of years for the payback time, but of course we will provide guidance. And already, if you look at the existing guidance for the existing EPBD for other articles, there are considerations on technical, economical, and functional feasibility, and we would look into this and develop a little bit further. What could it mean specifically for solar installations? Thank you.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Davide? For now?
For now.
Yeah. When you have her on the panel later, to watch out and you steady yourself. Caroline, I really appreciate your intervention for, putting people at the center of the energy transition. And if you can tell us a bit more about like community engagement and what the lessons are for like getting people really involved.
Yes, and maybe I should also answer a question I see up here. What exactly is a one-stop shop? Because this is at the heart of the community engagement. So
is that from you? Yeah,
he's
in the room.
Okay,
yeah,
oh, great.
They're
and
all
someone
doing
in the
it
room,
now.
thankfully. I don't like the idea of being streamed online, to be honest, so it's nice to be in the room. So the one-stop shop, I mentioned it briefly, but to sum up again, it should be like, there's not just one way to do it, but there are commonalities. It should be a sort of independent, an entity that can offer independent, ideally free or as free as possible support for a building owner in their renovation journey. It should make it accessible. So there are three things that always have to be there. There's administrative support. So actually explaining to people and making it clear, making a very clear process. Here, what are the subsidies available? What do you need for what's the subsidies? Actually, that's the financing part, sorry, but all the administration, all the documents that you have to do to fill out to apply. So that needs to be streamlined, simplified, easy to access, and there needs to be ideally human support or a system that's accessible. Secondly, the financing support. So showing again either how to access subsidies and financing and helping people understand how they can actually pay for these renovations and making it easy for them, and ideally in a staged approach as well. That can also be something. And then technical support, so having experts who actually know about renovation, who can do an energy audit, who can support with, say, these are the technologies, these are the interventions that are going to make the most difference for you. That's the idea. And the Commission, again, in the EPBD, they say that member states are responsible to set this up. Private entities can be involved, but in the experience that we've seen, it's most effective when there is a local authority who's really running the show, who's involved, and that it's institutionalized. So it's not just an ad hoc thing that developed one day and then it went away. And working, again, now this then gets on to the community engagement question that you asked me. Because again, it needs to be very targeted to the population. It's very important to understand the social fabric of wherever you are and understand the needs of the people and the target audience. If we're looking at worst performing buildings in the residential sector, it's very similar to some of the cases that we saw that I briefly showed you, where you might be working with vulnerable populations. You're not going to have people, for example, like us in cities who are seeing nice posters in the metro. So the Opengela project actually is a very good example because they were working with, first of all, the local housing association. You had people who were, you really need passionate individuals who already know the situation very well, who are willing to go the extra mile. And they did several really interesting things for their engagement. I mean, they hired a lot of middle-aged women, actually, as ambassadors for the program, who would chat people up at the hair salon, at the fish shop, in the marketplaces. People in that community needed to hear from people that looked and talked like them, not people from Brussels. And they also had a lot of resource capacity. Again, going back to the the passionate individuals there on the ground, they were hand-holding people, very much so. So, for example, there is someone who forgot to submit their papers at the deadline. They had someone knocking on their door and saying, "What's going on? Why didn't you submit your papers? We're going to help you do it." There is someone. One of the cities was a very aging population. You had the situation of someone who had auditory problems who couldn't hear. So if they missed their papers, they couldn't call him on the phone. They would go directly to the person's house. The energy transition is unfortunately it's a lot of work, but this is the reality.
No, that was really good, and I'd love to let you keep talking, but I'm just keeping an eye on the time, and I'm aware that we haven't come back to Oligera yet. But I think you're completely right. I mean, that's been one of the big changes in my thinking over the last year, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Ingrid has to say about it. But really understanding this is not feasible for individual households. This is really at the neighbourhood level, a collective endeavour that this has to be done. But we're talking about places and what works in different places. And while we're there, while you're pitching solar thermal to us all, where does it work best? What type of buildings and where in Europe does solar thermal work best?
Well, solar thermal can be applied in different applications. We have solar thermal in buildings, but also can be used in the industry, and also in Europe we have these district heatings that we need also to decarbonize, and also it has a big use. It's very useful to decarbonize these district heatings. So honestly, can be applied in very different sort of places. Today, where we have been, where we have more penetration is in buildings, in residential buildings. Even standalone houses or even multi-dwelling buildings. In the Mediterranean countries, mainly to cover domestic hot water, but also in northern countries where the winter season is longer and stronger. Also, we are covering most part of the heating demand. So honestly, we have several sorts of applications.
And do you think there should be a grant or a subsidy for solar thermal? Like if I went to one of Caroline's one-stop shops there, would I be able to get a grant for it, do you think?
Okay. Controversial question, and I will give you my opinion, okay? So subsidies or grants, from my understanding, should be to balance all the technologies. Okay, because otherwise, if you give subsidies to everyone, at the end is happening what had happened in the recent times. You have a big inflation because you are not balancing anything. So I think the job of the regulators, the policymakers, is to understand which are the benefits of each technology, what can contribute for the society, and or regulate or balance, because there are some technologies that in the market have more competitiveness than others. For instance, and here maybe I can be a little bit controversial, but we have some technologies that are subsidized by the Chinese government, then also it has their effect. So, and here is my personal opinion. Yes, I am in favor of subsidies, but the subsidies has one purpose. It's just to balance technologies, trying to keep the benefits that all the technologies can bring to the society.
Okay.
Do you look like you want to argue with his controversial statement?
I don't want to argue. I agree. I just wanted to add something on the subsidy part. I had a conversation with someone recently, and I think that this idea, the fact they have to be targeted, as I said, as outreach does, it has to be targeted to the situation. So, for example, subsidies that are targeted to the individual based on individual motivation might not always be appropriate. And a radical idea that I had this discussion with this person was that it could also be that the installers might receive a bonus for pushing this technology, because installers actually have an enormous amount of power. You might say, oh, please install a heat pump or a solar panel for me. And they might be like, oh, but that's not really my area of expertise. I'm not comfortable with that. Let's just put this nice gas boiler instead. And you, the non-expert, you're going to be like, oh, well, what do I know? Sure, just do the easiest thing. Yeah. I don't know anything. Yeah. Very few people are going to have the motivation and knowledge to argue with the installers. So I think there are different ways of doing things. It's a complex design.
Absolutely, and installers are really the prescriptors. You know, yes, people has normal knowledge on the technology. There are several technologies, we are talking to that we need to reduce and to make systems more complex. And I absolutely agree that also we need to empower the installers and the engineers. Yeah.
Okay, empower installers. I would really like to keep talking with you, but unfortunately, the time is running. So thanks, Annette, for bringing us up to speed on the legislation. Thanks to you, Caroline, for your insights, and Olegera for your important market information and very able advocate for solar thermal, I must say. So you guys can sit down for now. Yay, awesome. And I think I invite Davide, Ingrid, and Josephine to take your places here on the stage. And while you are getting settled there, and you're all getting excited about solar thermal, you've guessed it, it's time for a question. Yes. Hold on, let me get the hammer justice. I'll just pose for this. How are you feeling? Let's take the temperature of the room with the question. The system is working and the Slido is up there. So you are all feeling warmed up about solar thermal by now, I hope. And when you're thinking about it, what's important to you? Is it the cost? Is it the efficiency? Are you thinking, oh, I can't wait to shrink my carbon footprint? Are you thinking, oh, well, he said it was a mature technology. I'd trust that. I could use it with my heat pump. Oh, you can get a grant for it, or maybe you can't because Oligera has cancelled them. No, just kidding. No, I won't get you in trouble. Sorry, man. Sorry. So what do you think? Okay, it's people are voting. Does anyone want to vote? And yes, capacity to lower my CO2 emissions. Really? No. Okay, this is a EUSEW crowd. Definitely. Yeah, I was expecting cost, I think there's an inherent bias in those ones. Normally you put the first one and it kind of shoots out like that.
That's growing. You see.
It's growing, is it? Oh, okay, yeah. Wow, you could look at those bars move back and forth all day. Okay, we'll say it's a healthy EUSEW crowd that balances their economic interests with also the need to reduce emissions, and efficiency is ranking low. So perhaps the energy efficiency principle is in peril. We might hear more about that from Ingrid later. But meanwhile, Josephine, I think you're first up. I will hand you the clicker as we move into the second of our solar talks. We're going to dive into the details of support schemes, the carrots to finance solar heat, and hear about what kind of help building owners actually need. So, Josephine Izard, you tell us about the support schemes for renewable heat in France. Please, Josephine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So in France, heating and cooling account for approximately 40% of our final energy consumption. Heating, domestic hot water, and air conditioning account for almost 80% of this consumption in the residential sector and 60% in the tertiary sector. And in industry and agriculture, heat use accounts for more than 30% of final energy consumption. So decarbonizing heat is a huge challenge. And in terms of energy production, fossil fuels cover 60% of heating and domestic hot water needs in the residential and tertiary sectors, and they cover more than 50% of energy needs in industry. So heat decarbonization requires energy demand reduction, renewable energy deployment, and electrification. Our French energy and climate law provides for a 30% share of renewables in gross final heat and cooling consumption by 2030 compared to 19% in 2015. And our current multi-annual energy plan provides for a 200 terawatt-hour reduction in final consumption of oil and petroleum products and a 100 terawatt-hour reduction in gas demand by 2028 through energy efficiency and renewable heat and gas. So the current public consultation on the next MEP includes a 10 terawatt-hour target for solar thermal heat consumption by 2035, and that relies on a 5 to 6 terawatt-hour target, sub-target for large-scale solar installations.
Are you okay? Is the system working?
I am okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So the first solar thermal support scheme in France is the Energy Renovation Grant, distributed by the National Housing Agency to finance thermal insulation, heating, ventilation, and energy auditing work in existing dwellings, both individual housing and condominiums. It was launched in 2020, and now it fully replaces the previous tax credit, which was a flat 30% tax credit on income.
You're going to have to speed these up.
The end of subsidies for gas boilers came into force in 2023. We have a 2024 budget of 3.8 billion, and this budget includes flat rate subsidies for solar thermal systems, including individual solar water heaters and solar combi systems. And we rely on Label Pack A+ tools, energy labeling tools, as part of the application process. We also have a VAT reduction scheme of 5.5% for energy saving works and renewable systems in dwellings, and we have interest-free loans. The next big thermal support scheme, solar thermal support scheme in France, is a heat fund, which is targeting investment in heating networks and heat generation from recovered energy or renewable sources, including solar thermal. So it's a combination of national and regional calls for projects. It has already helped over 8,500 projects since 2009, representing 45 terawatt-hour of an annual cumulative production. And so it targets the collective housing sector, the tertiary sector, the industrial sector, and local authorities in a very cost-effective way. We have a 820 million budget for 2024. It also includes national call for large-scale solar heating project with glazed collectors, and you have the full list on the slides. I'm accelerating. We finally have the energy saving certificates. It's the last important scheme. So it was launched in France in 2006. And so through this scheme, energy suppliers are required to achieve energy saving actions to reach targets in terawatt hour. And we have a reinforcement of subsidies that already has enabled 1.4 million heating replacement works. And this includes replacement of individual coal, oil, and gas-fired boilers with solar combi systems. And we also have a, last but not least, France 2030 investment plan, including a 450 million budget to finance technological development in low-carbon industrial processes. I'm available for questions.
Okay, there's loads going on. Well done. Are they white certificates, the energy saving certificates? Are they also known as white certificates?
Exactly.
Yeah,
In the
okay, I
UK
have you.
anyway.
Yeah, fine. There's loads of things I'd like to ask you about this, but Davide, I've been looking forward to this so much, you know that? Because, no, not at all. Because Davide Sabidin, Deputy Policy Manager for Climate at the European Environmental Bureau, he's all about the carrots today.
Now, I'll leave it here because it's
Just keep it where everyone can see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
exactly. So I mean, it's one of the most embarrassing situation I've been in, and I've been through a lot, I can tell you. So, but it's yes, indeed, we're gonna look at the carrot of the side of the story, and linking what Oleguer said also is how you frame the incentives. So I mean, we this is some analysis we did some time ago, like 2023, and we were looking at how many member states have an incentive scheme for renewable heating and for fossil heating. So it turns out that quite a few member states still supported fossil heating one way or another, and but good news that solar thermal had some sort of support in at least 25 member states, while heat pumps only counted for 24 member states. And there were two member states that weren't supported either a renewable or fossil fuel heating, which were Romania and Estonia. So what we looked at is the financial challenges. When we look at the average family, we look at the average investment. Technologies are slightly different because we targeted in Portugal, Spain, Cyprus, and Malta, air-to-air heat pumps plus solar thermal, while in the other countries we just look at air-to-water heat pumps, and then we look at how much does it cost in terms of payback time. If my boiler breaks down and I'm going with for a boiler with the incentives I have for a boiler, or for a heat pump, or a combination of solar and heat pump, okay, with incentives that I have for that combination. Okay, so how long does it, the difference? How long does it take to pay back with the savings, all right? So, of course, everything comes in place, the cost of gas, the taxation on electricity, and et cetera, et cetera. So, turns out that not many member states had a payback time of 7 years. We draw a line as a decent one,
Something
because
acceptable.
before that, after that, it's kind of a mortgage rather than an investment. So it's like we thought, like, if 7 years, like you change your kitchen, right, or or a car, well, after that it becomes very psychological more difficult, right? And then there were some member states, like 4 member states, where it was almost impossible to payback time within the lifetime of the product. That's like beyond the lifetime of a heat pump. And this is, of course, takes into consideration the existing funds for those families, okay, for those households. So it's a net cost. So then we wanted to see what is the gap for make everyone able to pay back in 7 years. Okay, so meaning that if you in this country you have a payback time of 10 years, okay, what does it mean, the extra amount of subsidy from the state that would just take down the payback to 7 years, and then multiply that amount for the number of gas and oil boilers in the whole country. Okay, so it turns out how much does it cost, for then you see that this is on a family scale. You have some member states where you have 0 incentives, and then of course you have to put there 9,000 euros out of 10,000 that was the original investment for Romania, for instance, or Bulgaria, because there's 0 investment in this moment. But the other places such as Portugal, Spain, and Cyprus and Malta, you see that the extra needed amount of money is very, very low, and it's mostly focused on this 30% population that cannot afford even a big share, even a smaller share of the upfront cost, and they need to cover 100% of the upfront cost, and therefore they need a 0 interest loan, and that the interest of that interest loan will be paid by the state. So that's also a cost other than the upfront cost that you're going to have as a grant or as another form. So all in all, we came to this figure, which is roughly 20 billion. And then I'm closing with a couple of sentences. So that might be interesting for today's discussion, that in several southern countries, solar plus heat pumps, air-to-air heat pumps particularly, was the quickest and the cheapest fix to decarbonize heating and cooling. Why is that? So because many dwellings, even in blocks of flats, in Portugal, south of Italy, south of Spain, Malta, Cyprus, they don't have hydronic distribution. And because the heat need is only concentrated in January and February, then the rest of the year just get, So air-to-air heat pump might be just good enough instead of substituting the local space heaters that they're using now. And so for us, I'm also leaving with a call for action. It is very important that from 2025 incentives are allowed only to non-fossil technologies, in particular those based on carbon neutral refrigerants and solar energy. That's our main takeaway from these figures, and I'm happy to discuss them with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Davide. That was great. Indeed, I hope everyone heard that message. It's high time to stop the fossil fuel subsidies. We have to make better use of these funds. So I'm looking forward to hearing more during the Q&A. But before that, the last opening intervention from Dr. Engineer Ingrid Vogler. Okay, just Ingrid, fine. And Head of Energy and Technology at GDW, Federal Association of German Housing and Real Estate Companies, steering the conversion of social housing for millions of citizens. Take it away, Ingrid.
Thank you very much. I'm speaking for affordable housing. And most of measures increase housing costs, especially in all countries where housing companies pay for itself for the measures. That means at last tenants pay for the measures. And I like to stress 2 points. The first point is that we see a change in using thermal solar in 2 ways. The first way, the heat is not used now for heat storage, for heating and hot water. The heat from thermal solar is used for heat pumps as heat source. That's an example for a neighborhood approach with such heat pumps and with solar thermal and with PV, both for heating the neighborhood. And the second is that not only at source for a heat pump, also we see more and more solar double use, as you could see in my first chart, the double use heat and PV from 1 square meter. The second point I want to stress is that the money isn't endless. Housing companies live from rents. Rents must be paid by households. Households must be pay affordable rents. And we see a change in mind. Till this time, we spoke about historical growth, about reduction of CO2. And if we use solar heat for the storage, we reduce the gas also. If we use a heat pump, we go to zero. If the electricity also is zero, and we need good heat sources for heat pumps. And that's why we think we have a change in mind also for economic reasons. I will speak about this. From first to do energy efficiency, insulation, second the rest renewable, and third optimization is also. Now we think we must do first renewable because the goal is no carbon dioxide. And then how depends on how many money is in the company, is in the rents, is in the subsidies. We do efficient use of energy. We must a minimum level of efficient use, but we mustn't have maximum efficiency. We mustn't have passive houses. We mustn't have also nearly zero energy houses in the stock. We mustn't have that. We cannot pay that if we want to have both renewables, decarbonized housing stock, and an efficient use of energy. So we deal with minimum efficiency. We must have an efficiency, and we also see the great importance of building automation and smart homes and helping the tenants to use the energy efficient. And that's my points. Thank you.
That was brilliant. Well done. This slide is really interesting, and I warn you, Josephine, especially, I'm going to come back to this one. But for now, Caroline, Annette, Olivier back on the stage here, and we get everyone for this exciting last, and I guess this is our third solar talk. This is our third configuration. We have some questions coming in online, and I kind of want to hijack it by going to your slide, Ingrid, actually, just Josephine, because I want you to react to this. No, okay, fine, I have to take the Slido questions for now. What have we got here? Many residents, for example, in Germany live in rental properties. They're interested in these sorts of technology, but agreements with landlords and housing companies. So I guess this is a split incentive question. Are you mostly targeting property owners, big solar farms, or small rental households? Is the person who asked that question in the room? Or they're hiding? No. Do you know who this question is for? Does anyone want to take this? I think there's a misunderstanding on Josephine. Do you want to take
it? All three.
Okay.
We're targeting property owners, but also households living in properties they do not own. And we are also targeting large-scale solar plants, thermal plants. So both for industrial purposes or for heating districts, district heating, sorry.
Yeah.
So everything.
Okay, everything. That's you, the person asking online. And Josephine, while you are speaking, I was just wondering, you set out a number of targets that you have at national level, and do you know if you guys are on track to reach those targets with the programs, extensive programs that you presented?
We are making sure we can reach them.
Okay.
So it means an increase in our budget in the next few years for some of our grants, subsidies, schemes in general. But we are making our next multi-annual energy plan compatible with European targets.
Okay.
With the recast directives.
That's great. And Davide, you've looked at the different national funding schemes, and I'm sure that you're aware of the ones that Josephine presented also. From what you've looked at and assessed, what would you say are the success factors for a funding program to decarbonize heating and cooling?
Well, I think that the determining factor is whether people are in the end buying on in these incentives schemes, right? I mean, so and I think
Do you
that
mean if the take up is
if
good?
they take up and if they find it useful and they participate. Thing is that the key is people don't bank. People don't necessarily bank on future savings, right? So either you have the money on the bank, or yes, you have your savings, or you don't. Okay, so I mean, there's a very few little share of people that would think, okay, this is very good interest rate because if I do this, it's gonna get like 5% rate over 20 years. No, I think so. You have to come up with a solutions for those who don't have the money in the bank. It can be private-led, market-led. It can be led by subsidies from the member states. It can be only for a certain amount of people or for everyone. Or it can also be coming back to the question of the tenant and the owner. It can also be because you make it easier for the owner to adopt the technology because they don't have to spend money. And so they would go for investment regardless of the fact that they're not profiting from any savings in the bills because that's for the tenant, right? So, I mean, is it fair to give money for free for the investment to someone that is actually owning a property? Probably not, maybe not, okay? But is it fair to the tenant that is going to have lesser, smaller bills and then maybe they're also struggling to make ends meet? Well, that's fair. So maybe the means is not fair, but the ends is fair. So that's also maybe one option that you can consider. That was the case of the Italian superbonus, for instance.
Josephine, do you have any reaction on that? Or
No, I agree. I would only say that the financing scheme also depends on the final user, of course. If you consider large solar plants, then you have to know if it's a third party that is financing the installation. And if so, you might want to use economic analysis rather than a scheme designed for household owners.
okay, great. Thanks for that. We'll go back to the Slido, and this is one of those sort of mixture statement. Is that Bjorn? Bjorn, are you in the room? Bjorn.
Yeah. Do you want me to?
Did you write that, Bjorn?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There's not two. There's another Bjorn watching online. Okay. Do you want to put your question? Is it a question?
Yeah, I think so. My question is kind of like if we optimize all our future buildings and we install a lot of PVs or solar thermal, we will stress the grid a lot. It will be a problem for the existing grid. So my question was, should we kind of like try to include in these guides how to optimize buildings for solar energy, also how to use a smart way of store the energy?
Okay. So there's a few things to pick out of that, but will solar thermal stress the grid? Does anyone want to talk down that end?
Yes, so thank you very much for the question. I think that the self-consumption will be really, really important with the grid challenge that we have today. So self-consumption of solar thermal combined with the storage in hot water tanks or storage in the thermal fabric of the buildings, and also PV linked with the storage, and also bidirectional and the smart EV charging. So I really think that combining different technologies, and in particular with storage and smart controls, this is really the way we need to go.
Yes, let me add that solar thermal is not stressing the electrical grid. Indeed, always has intrinsically have water storage. Okay, we are storing energy. So what's happening with the new heating installations is that we are changing the paradigm from power to storing energy. And this is the case of, for instance, with heat pumps, or even, and also another problem that has, for instance, PV is that it's harder to store. Also, you need to convert in heat, okay, to store. If not, you have to store in chemical batteries. So yes, of course, the energy transition it means to have to give the houses, the buildings, with some sort of intelligence, so to make the most of the renewables that we have available. So you need to know when you have to switch on the heat pump, when you need to put the energy on a storage, when you need to be ready for consumption.
So you're talking about demand response or demand side flexibility.
Well,
Indeed,
you need to store the energy because in the old world, let's say, when with a gas boiler that is power has enough power, you can cover the demand just at the moment. Now we are changing to low temperature installations. This means that it's not working with power; it's working with energy. You need to accumulate energy and have ready when do you need it. And this is how solar thermal has always worked. Okay, so this is the reason why the new installations give more space to take most of solar thermal.
And we're here talking about short-term energy storage, but there are also emerging technologies, combining solar thermal with geothermal energy, for instance, through borehole energy storage. So combining mature technologies to have longer-term storage capacities can be interesting for certain applications.
Nice, thanks. Is that all right for you, Bjorn? Okay, good man. We have another one. Are you in the room, VAC? One-stop shops are to take place at local level, but is there a role at EU level to help provide common objective information on all technologies? Oh, I think there is. This feels like a cool heating coalition kind of question. Available for the energy transition to help the local cities gain time, ease their work. Who would like to take or respond to this question?
I can say one thing, but I think Annette will probably be able to elaborate on it. The short answer is that, yes, there is a role of the European Commission is responsible providing a guidance also on a harmonized approach to developing one-stop shops for cities. I'm not sure what this guidance will include exactly, so maybe Annette, you might say more.
Peek.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. So I would think that the guidance on one-stop shops would be more towards perhaps the purpose and the functioning of the one-stop shops. And this is a question more related to the content, but I see it a little bit as a rhetoric question. So I would, is this the view of the room and the audience, that there is such a role and that would then be a takeaway, or is this better done at more local level? This is... yeah, I think it's an open question.
I think it's an open question. How is the room feeling about this question? Do you think there should be a provision of common objective information on all technologies, all clean heating and cooling technologies? Yes, no? Yes. Okay, I'll put my hand up. Yes. Yes. Right. Yeah, you have to. You're working for them. Come on. Okay, we'll take that as as a mood, let's say. Okay, can we disappear the Slido and go back to Ingrid's last slide, because I'm kind of really want to unpack this one. Marie, if you're on it, can you disappear? Yeah, that's it. Brilliant. Okay, so I just want to, Ingrid, I want you to talk about this slide, because this is like heresy or something. Do you know what I mean?
I know.
Yeah. But you're a German respectable lady. Do you know what I mean? So I really, and so as I understand it, when you say historically grown, this is, Josephine, I also noticed this was actually in your presentation, the idea, and we'd have a lot of energy efficiency church people here. I think, energy efficiency first, reduce demand, replace it with renewables and electrify, right? And that would be our sort of classic approach. But Ingrid, the heretic, has come to say, no, we can't afford it. And I just want you to talk about the difference between these two things, because this is from your experience on the ground that you say this.
Let me make an example. A German housing company, 1,000 dwellings, invests every year 1 million in energy efficiency. Till this time, this 1 million was spent in thermal insulation, making the energy decreasing, and then they got a new gas boiler in this building. That's that wasn't so. And now in Germany we have a new law to use renewable energy. It's the right way because we want to decarbonize, and every new heating system must have 64% of renewables. Means also in the stock you have to deal with heat pumps, or you have a district heating. District heating is the second part because they are not decarbonized yet, but you can use it. But they also, as a second law, have to decarbonize till 2045. Let's go back to the heat pumps. Now you has to renew 3 times more heating systems a year than you would insulate buildings. You would insulate 1% of your dwellings a year, but you have to build new heating systems at 3% of your buildings a year. And a heat pump is 3 times expensive than a gas boiler. Now, the housing companies spend their money on heat pumps or hybrid systems from time to time. In old buildings, you have a hybrid system, 2 parts heat pump, 1 part gas boiler. And from the 1 million, may say 800,000 goes in heat pumps. What can you insulate? Not so much. You can not 10 buildings, maybe 1 building insulate. But you cannot have so much success in more insulating if you are must build heat pumps, and if your money is has a cover, and you cannot increase rents as you want because it must be affordable for the households. And we have a middle rent in Germany from by the housing companies 6.4 euro per square meter, and you are allowed at maximum 2 euros more for all modernization, energetic or non-energetic, new sanitary. It's all in the 2 euros, and you must have 1 euro for the heat pump.
So, as I understand it, you have a limited budget. You cannot raise the revenue because the nature of your tenants is such that they really don't want to be
limited
gentrified. But you've got to
investigations.
comply with these objectives. You've got to comply with the legal objectives, and this is the best way to spend your money. So, do you want to comment? Do you want to make a comment on that, Annette?
I had a question. So
Great.
do you differentiate? Because of course, if you look at the very worst performing buildings, insulating them compared to insulating those that are relatively well performing, I think it makes a huge difference if you use the small amount of money you have to really put them into improving the efficiency of the worst performing. Is this an approach that you are taking?
40% of the German housing company buildings are already insulated. And from the other 60%, we must decide what should we do. Some buildings will be insulated, but not all 60%. It is there is not enough money in the market, in the rents, in the subsidies. No one can spend so much money, and so we must decide first to use the heat pump. And second, if then is money, we will insulate the roof again also, but the most expensive measure ever, and I'm not lucky about this, is insulation of outer walls. And it's a pity, and I want it would be another point, would be other, but it isn't so. And we spend up to 1,000 euro per square meter for a complete energetic renovation, including all outer wall insulation, roof insulation, new windows, heat pump. It's so expensive. And every year at that time, since 3 or 4 years, the costs for energetic measures increase 10% per year, 40% in 4 years.
Yeah.
And the rents increase 2% per year.
It's not keeping up. Caroline, what's your take on it?
Coming from the efficiency church.
Yes, yeah. The efficiency church.
You make a very good argument, and I certainly don't want to argue. I would of course, as Annette mentioned still that 40% of the heating of a home can be lost through the roof. So myself as the non-technical expert, I still have to imagine that, especially for the worst performing buildings, that it can't be totally either or, because it's not very efficient if you're in a home that's where the roof is not well insulated, and then you're losing heat, and you're also maybe still experiencing colder winters, or you're still experiencing this extreme, heat and cold in the attic, for example, of the house. My children's bedroom is in the attic right now, for example, and their rooms are boiling hot in the summer and freezing in the winter, and I think insulation makes a difference. And what I wanted to say, beyond talking about money, is maybe also a question for all of you, if I can be so bold, is that I see that we're talking about money, but can we also and payback times, but can we not afford it can we afford not to renovate at the same time? And I want to think beyond just efficiency and just decarbonization, as we're constantly talking about it. BPIE, we recently published a paper where we looked at a bit of a different spin, and we looked at the health angle. And for example, 1 in 4 Europeans now, sorry, I have to look at my phone because I have all these statistics that I think are really interesting, and they're not spoken about enough, but 1 in 4 Europeans right now are living in buildings where national or indoor air quality falls below national standards. And this has direct impacts on people's on asthma, on breathing, on respiratory issues. There's been many people who have died from overheating in their homes during intense heat waves over the past couple of years. In Spain and France and Italy, we've heard many stories. The economic benefits are also huge. I'm sorry, I just want to read a few numbers very quickly. In workplaces, improving daylight, for example, renovations. The Healthy Buildings Barometer. Improving the sunlight can also have an impact, a 10% increase on productivity. Hospital stays, the medical costs go down 21%. I'll have to, sorry, I'm not going to spin off a number of stats, but the numbers are very impressive. And so I think it's also really worth considering in this discourse, not only the costs now, but looking at the costs all on the other side. And I don't think that we've ever done this direct comparison as such, but can we afford not to make buildings healthier and more comfortable now?
Davide, what do you think?
Well, I have strong opinions on this because we've been looking at this again from the not only from the perspective of energy and cost, but also from the perspective of time. So me, as many hundreds of Europeans have gone myself through full renovation of house in my life, and that entailed being out of my place for not less than 4 months. Okay, and an amount of money, which, like I would say, it's once in a lifetime or twice in a lifetime, which is not the case of changing a boiler to a heat pump. It's a completely different scale of investment, and also a different hassle that you go through, particularly if you have a family or if you have to empty a full blocks of flat, funding a temporary solutions for maybe 20 families that you have to put somewhere else and then take back with a lot of problems. So what I'm saying is that we fully agree with BPIA that every time you can go through a deep renovation, you have to go through deep renovation. And when you go through deep renovation, renewable energy should be the go-to solutions to provide the strictly necessary amount of energy to heat and cool. But even in the most ideal situation that we call for, that this means going up to 3% renovation rate at the national level, okay, on a yearly base, which means you have a whole supply chain there working, okay. It still is much less, as we heard, than the amount of turnover that we have in terms of changing boilers to other heating technologies, if not for other things, because boilers break down. Okay, so there's way more breakdown in boilers than people that can afford to go for or can have the logistic possibility to go for a deep renovation. So what we say is that in all those situations where heat pump or solar cannot be installed in the framework of a full renovation. They should still be installed instead of a gas boilers, because it still makes sense, and it's the first step of a stage renovation that will come after. It might be only the roof, it might be the full renovation of the walls too. But so we shouldn't be like shying away from changing to renewable energy only because we cannot in this moment do a full renovation of the house, because we will get there, because all the benefits that you were mentioning were absolutely primary targets that we should have for everyone, regardless where they live, their background, their financial situation. We all deserve very healthy and good homes, but probably there are different steps to be taken and different paces depending on the situation of the building.
Okay.
You are all right from a hygienic side of view, from the technical side of view. But if you are a company and you have 1 million to spend in investment, you cannot spend 2 million in investment because you have a disbalance in the company, and you can't have a disbalance in the company, and that's the point.
And no, I think that's what's so interesting about the message that you bring us, Ingrid. And I just was curious as well as, how do you see solar thermal contributing to the energy mix, do you know, of the portfolio that you're talking about?
The contribution?
Yeah.
Oh, it's most wanted because we have a strong way to heat pumps. And if you can use the roof also for heat and for power, you can have the power for the heat pump and the heat source for the heat pump, because of the heat source is one of our biggest problems. In dense cities, you cannot go in the ground. It's not so ideal to go in the outer air. And a heat source from the roof. I think it's our future to use it in cities.
Okay, great. I'm just going to check the Slido, and anyone can put an old-fashioned hand up and wave as well if they want to speak. I don't know if we can... The what? Oh, yeah, sorry, thank you.
Thank you very much. From the French perspective, the simulations done as part of the next multi-annual energy plan show that in France we have to combine both approaches. We have no choice. So for different buildings, we have to use different approaches. So this is why in 2024 we subdivided the existing grant scheme, MaPrimeRénov', into two different schemes. One scheme targeting heat decarbonization with subsidies that are flat rate subsidies, and another scheme that is targeting extensive, comprehensive thermal renovations with a subsidy that is proportional to the total cost of renovation. So we need those two approaches and those two schemes to reach our targets by 2030 and eventually 2050.
And when you say a flat rate, is that kind of technology neutral or
Not technology neutral, not revenue neutral.
Yeah.
So we have a list of equipments with technical requirements, basic technical requirements, and with a subsidy that varies according to revenue and location of the building.
And what do you think other member states could learn? What lessons learned would you pass on to someone in another member state looking to set up a renewable heat incentive scheme?
That incentive schemes that are based on fine-tuning increase demand.
Okay.
But we have to be very careful at technical requirements, technical assistance for households, level of subsidies. It was a very good comment made before.
Okay, brilliant. That's great. Anyone else? We are coming near to the time. Anyone else? Dear panelists, you're okay? You've had your say? One final plug for solar thermal there, Oligar? No. Okay. Well, I will say thanks, folks, before we close this session. Oh, yes, here's $1 million question for you all after everything that you've heard today. Would you be inclined to install a solar heat system for your home? The system is working. The Slido is open. There is only one right answer to this question. I would say yes, with no subvention scheme. I presume that means a grant. Yes, but only if I got a grant. I'm not sure. Well, then what are you even on the Slido for? Or no, je dis non, in which case you're not meant to be in this room, basically. Are people voting in the room? What should we in the room organically vote for with our hands? We'd want a solar heat system, wouldn't we? I would say yes. I'd prefer for it to be subsidized. Okay. BPIE only with subvention. Yes. Yes, EV also in favor. It's been noted. Okay. So yes, and the system is working, and this is what people, yes, even without a grant, I would go for solar thermal. So thanks so much to our panelists for your insightful contributions and all of you for your active participation. And we've explored, some of the critical importance of decarbonizing heat, the promising role of solar thermal technology in the people-centered energy transition. We have EU legislation coming on stream. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who looks forward to a cohesive heating and cooling strategy coming forth from the European Commission to help us maximize our efforts and advance the #CoolHeating revolution that we are part of. So let's stay committed to making sustainable, renewable and affordable heating and cooling a reality across Europe. And thank you, and enjoy the rest of EU Sustainable Energy Week. Thanks very much.